तो पहले आपका स्पीकिंग वगैरह स्पीकिंग ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਪਾਰਟ ਹੈ ਰੀਡ ਆਊਟ ਰੀਡ ਆਊਟ ਦਾ ਨੰਬਰ ਰੀਡਿੰਗ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਰੀਡਿੰਗ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 30 ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ 35
We are providing coaching and provide PTE latest material. For more information, visit our website, WPTE Center. We are also available on other social media apps like Telegram. If you want more updates related to PTE, then join our Telegram channel and also follow on Instagram so that you can get more and more PTE updates.
Historically, reasons for the migration of Asians to the United States were similar in some ways to those for the Atlantic migration of Europeans, to escape from poverty and civil war, and to find employment opportunity and freedom. Chinese laborers were recruited to build the Transcontinental Railroad in the mid-19th century and provide domestic services in cities such as San Francisco. They were followed by the Japanese and Filipinos in the early 20th century, who labored in Hawaiian plantations, California farms, and Alaskan canneries. Of these early Asian Americans, only the Japanese were allowed to immigrate as families at the insistence of the Japanese government. For these early generations, Asians in America were largely bachelor communities of temporary sojourners, with male-to-female ratios as high as 10 to 1. Asian American children in those early years were rare. Since 1970, the demography of this population has changed tremendously. In 2002, Asian Americans were slightly more than 4% of the U.S. population. The growth of the Asian American population since 1970 is due in great part to the elimination of exclusionary immigration policies that existed before 1965, implementation of new refugee statutes directly flowing from the Vietnam War, and the rise of second and subsequent U.S.-born generations. In 1970, there were 1.5 million Asian Americans. This amounts to an 8-fold to 9-fold increase in little more than 30 years.
Cities and towns are not only growing in size and number, they are also gaining new influence. The urban transition offers significant opportunities to improve the quality of life, but whether this potential is realized depends critically on how cities are managed and on the national and local policies affecting their development. The development of urban areas is also closely linked to the rural economy through the exchange of labor, goods, services, information, and technology. Neglecting urban issues leads to significant social and environmental costs, however. In the two most urbanized that the World Bank serves, Latin America and Europe/Central Asia, over half of the poor already live in urban areas. By 2025, 2/3 of the poor in these regions and 1/3 of the poor in East and South Asia will reside in cities or towns. The nature of urban poverty is more than an income or employment issue and is also characterized by squalid living conditions, risks to life and health from poor sanitation, air pollution, crime and violence, traffic accidents and natural disasters, and the breakdown of traditional familial and communal safety nets. Urban populations are also particularly hard hit by macro-financial shocks, such as the recent crises in East Asia and Russia. Urban environmental degradation has the most immediate effects on poor urban residents, but also has serious national and global impacts.
A 25-year-old man who told the police he was tired of life went on a killing rampage in a popular shopping street in central Tokyo on Sunday, plowing his truck into a crowd of pedestrians before stabbing passers-by with a survival knife. 7 people died and 11 were injured. The attack took place shortly after noon on a street that had been closed to vehicles for the day in Akihabara, the main district for electronics in Tokyo and a magnet for fans of Japanese anime and manga comics. The killing stunned a country that has long enjoyed low crime rates but where a series of random stabbings have recently occurred. The police identified the attacker as Tomohiro Kato, who was living by himself in a small apartment in Shizuoka, just west of Tokyo. According to reports in the Japanese news media, Mr. Kato told the police that he had grown tired of life, hated the world, and had gone to Akihabara to kill people. Anyone was okay, he told the police, according to the reports. Japanese television showed the police holding Mr. Kato on the ground after the attack. He was dressed in a black t-shirt, off-white trousers and jacket, and was wearing sneakers. The police said the attack began around 12:30 p.m., when Mr. Kato drove a white, 2-ton rental truck into the street in a zigzag pattern, hitting several people. He then got out of the truck and began yelling and stabbing passers-by, including a police officer. Japanese television, displaying images captured on cell phones by witnesses, showed bodies scattered in the area. The authorities were seen trying to revive several victims. 6 men and 1 woman, ranging in age from 19 to 74, died, the authorities said.
There is probably no marijuana-friendlier place in the country than here in Mendocino County, where plants can grow more than 15 feet high. Medical marijuana clubs adopt stretches of highway, and the sticky, sweet aroma of cannabis fills this city's streets during the autumn harvest. Lately, however, residents of Mendocino County, like those in other parts of California, are wondering if the state's embrace of marijuana for medicinal purposes has gone too far. Medical marijuana was legalized under state law by California voters in 1996, and since then 11 other states have followed, even though federal law still bans the sale of any marijuana. But some frustrated residents and law enforcement officials say the California law has increasingly and unintentionally provided legal cover for large-scale marijuana growers, and the problems such as big money operations can attract. It's a clear shield for commercial operations, said Mike Sweeney, 60, a supporter of both medical marijuana and a local ballot measure on June 3 that called for new limits on the drug in Mendocino. And we don't want those here. The outcome of the ballot measure is not known, as votes are still being counted, but such community pushback is increasingly common across the state, even in the most liberal communities. In recent years, dozens of local governments have banned or restricted cannabis clubs, more formally known as dispensaries that provide medical marijuana to patients, in the face of public safety issues involved in its sale and cultivation, including crime and environmental damage.
Now, as you know already, there will be a midterm exam next week. The exam will be an open book, open note, and open internet resource exam. But you can't use a classmate or me during the exam. Many of the questions on this exam don't have definitive answers. I wish to assess your critical thinking ability and your ability to combine ideas. A poorly organized answer will not get the same grades as a well-organized answer. Here are some good ways to study for the exam. First of all, it would be better for you to organize and review your lecture notes. That means you many need to compile notes and lab test results if you have not done that already. I strongly suggest that you write trial outlines before the exam. I think it will make you feel more comfortable. Just stop by my office.
When the time comes, its peers should follow suit. Of these, the European Central Bank faces the trickiest challenge because it has acted as, in effect, the backstop to Eurozone bond markets, a mechanism that otherwise the currency bloc still lacks. But the main safety valve lies elsewhere, with banks and investors. Bitter experience has shown that debt-funded assets can magnify losses, causing financial crises. For this reason, banks must be able to withstand any reversal of today's high asset prices and low defaults. That means raising bank capital in places where it is too low, especially the Eurozone, and not backsliding on strenuous stress tests, as America's Treasury proposes. In the end, however, there may be no escape for investors from the low future returns and even losses that high asset prices imply. They and regulators should take a leaf out of the intelligent investor and make sure that they have a margin of safety.
Here are a couple different stories you can tell about our economy. One goes like this. 8 years after the worst economic crisis of our lifetimes, our economy has created jobs for 71 straight months. That's a new record. Unemployment has fallen below 5%. Last year, the typical household saw its income grow by about $2,800, the biggest one-year increase ever. And the uninsured rate is at an all-time low. All that is true. What's also true is that too much of our wealth is still taken by the top, and that leaves too many families still working paycheck to paycheck, without a lot of breathing room. There are two things we can do about this. We can prey on people's worries for political gain. Or we can actually do something to help working families feel more secure in today's economy. Count me in the latter camp. And here's one thing that will help right away. Making sure more of our families have access to paid leave. Today, having both parents in the workforce is an economic necessity for many families. But right now, millions of Americans don't have access to even a single day of paid sick leave.
This weekend, we'll dedicate the newest American icon on our national mall, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It's a beautiful building, 5 stories high and some 70 feet below the ground, situated just across the street from the Washington Monument. And this museum tells a story of America that hasn't always taken a front seat in our national narrative. As a people, we've rightfully passed on the tales of the giants who built this country. But too often, willful or not, we've chosen to gloss over or ignore entirely the experience of millions upon millions of others. But this museum chooses to tell a fuller story. It doesn't gauze up some bygone era or avoid uncomfortable truths. Rather, it embraces the patriotic recognition that America is a constant work in progress, that each successive generation can look upon our imperfections and decide that it is within our collective power to align this nation with the high ideals of our founding.
I delivered a report to President Obama laying out how far we've come since he put me in charge of the cancer moonshot that was back in January, and lay out a real vision for where we need to go in the immediate future to do in 5 years what would otherwise take 10, to inject a real sense of urgency into the fight against cancer, and to change the culture and reimagine our system in order to be able to win. When President Nixon declared war on cancer in 1971, he had no army, he had no resources, and no clear strategy. But after 4 to 5 years of progress, funding research, training scientists and physicians, and treating millions of patients, we now have the army. We now have tools, powerful tools. And with this moonshot, we now have a clear strategy for the road ahead. It matters, folks, because there's a consensus now that we're at an inflection point with science, medicine, and technology all advancing faster than ever and offering real promise. We can't play by the rules of 1971. We didn't have this working for us.
For the first time, Japanese researchers have conducted a real-life experiment that shows how some traffic jams appear for no apparent reason. They placed the 22 vehicles on a single track and asked the drivers to cruise around at a constant speed of 30 kilometers an hour. At first, traffic moved smoothly, but soon the distance between cars started to vary and vehicles clumped together at one point on the track, but the jams spread backward around the track, like a shockwave at a rate of about 20 kilometers an hour. Real-life jams move backward at about the same speed,